Come.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving up your time early on a Sunday morning. Great to see so many people here who have a love and a passion for the game, like these two gentlemen who decided to sit down, and I'm sure they'll explain why they wrote the book. It's a riveting read, to be honest, about what can be achieved, what could be achieved, and what I believe will be achieved in the future. There's no question that football is on the march. It's growing here in India. It's getting bigger, it's getting better, it's getting stronger, it's getting faster. And although it might not be closing the gap with cricket just yet, we won't mention what's going to happen a little bit later on, but it will one day, eventually, maybe go on a par with cricket here in India. I firmly believe that. But these two guys believed in that as well, which is why they turned around, they put their heads together and came up with this book. And if you want something that's going to give you a pathway and give you an understanding about what the passion involved in football is, then definitely Awakening the Blue Tigers is that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
So, firstly, I'd like to say thank you, everyone, for having me here. And I'm extremely, extremely sorry. I know I came flying in saying sorry, so everyone heard, but I still want to apologize again for being delayed. The sea link was shut. I'm putting this in case this is live streaming, so everyone knows. And my joke was that, with all due respect, and I have immense respect for everyone on this panel, my only consolation was at least I wasn't delayed for a football match. So that would have meant I would have actually jumped out of the car and run, because our kids are obsessed with football. And I don't know if Quasar and the others knew when they invited me to moderate this panel, that while I'm absolutely no football expert, and I'm so honored to be with all these football experts and hear from them, my perspective, or the way I'll be asking questions, is more as a soccer mom. So I'm embarrassingly embracing the tag of being one of those moms who flies onto the field when they win and screams and cheers, and it's brought out a side of me that honestly I didn't know existed, and I'm truly grateful to the game of football for doing that. I'm already excited about the next matches the kids are playing, and there aren't many things that get that kind of adrenaline going in us. So my questions will probably come more from that perspective. So a huge congratulations on the book. I'm actually at the Tata Literature Fest. I shouldn't be confessing this, but I'm not a very good reader. But I really couldn't put this down. And just last week, we took our younger son for the Singa Cup football tournament in Singapore, where he was with his Barca elite team. And we actually had to almost fight about who could read it on the flight. So it's a wonderful read. So I'm going to start with you, Neel. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write the book, and after having lived abroad for 30 years, what brought you back to help with the development of football in India?
Thank you, Tara. I grew up in the U.S., grew up in California, played soccer growing up there, and I remember early days where I loved the sport like anything, but when the national team would come to California, sometimes I'd be in the audience in the stands with like only 20 people watching our U.S. national team playing. But then the '94 World Cup came in the U.S. national team was there, incredible to experience, and I watched the 1999 Women's World Cup. I was in the stands watching the women beat China in front of with 100,000 people, and I was part of the Major League Soccer's growth and development. So I watched like almost no culture for football in America to what has now become an incredible, burgeoning, thriving ecosystem where not just Latin Americans or Europeans who live in America love the sport, but Americans love the sport, and everyone feels connected to it in some way. So when I came to India for the first time in 2008, I also started feeling the connection for the love for the sport at the grassroots level. But even I went to a Mohan Bagan match and I thought, wow, there's 80,000 people here for this Federation Cup final. So you feel that passion, grassroots at the top. But what I realized is that there was a lot missing in terms of the programs, the platforms, the partnerships to help the ecosystem thrive here.
Yeah.
So because of my unique experiences in the West, I thought, it'd be interesting to come over here and just be one of the many people trying to help this sport grow. So that was one of the big reasons I moved in 2009, thinking I'd just stick around for a couple of years, but 13 years later, I'm still here, so that's been incredible. And the other quick thing I'll say is that everyone says that, in the US, well, it's not a soccer country, it's never going to make it, and I always wanted to tell people, no, it's so much more than that. There's so much of a love for the sport in the country. And then I've been in India 13 years working in football, and everyone says the same thing. It's just a cricket country. Football's never going to make it. And people like Gaurav and I, and Paul and Mukul, we've been able to travel the whole country really uncovering the love and passion for the sport. And I wanted to use this book, and we wanted to use this book to let people know, the 1.4 billion people in India, that no, we actually have a beautiful relationship with this sport, and there's limitless potential. So instead of telling everyone, I just thought we'd put it in a book, and hopefully people will get it.
Yeah, no, as I said, it's a riveting read, and it's an easy read, and I think that really helps as well, because you don't have to be an expert, and I always come back to that because I'm learning about the game as our kids are more and more passionate about it, and I love that as well, that you don't have to be, it's not intimidating, you don't feel, because sometimes with sport you feel, oh, I don't really understand it, so I can't really get into it, but this is a game that anyone can actually understand. So Gaurav, what do you think could be done, honestly, by lay people to actually help with the development of football?
Very simple question, very short question, and I have a one-word answer for that, which is participation. I think participation at every level of the pyramid, whether you're in school at the kindergarten level, or in junior school or high school, or whether you're aiming and wanting to go all the way to the professional level, I think participation and having an organized participation structure is the most important thing. Along with the participation, if you can introduce competitiveness and a competition structure as well, I think there's nothing better. So participation is that one thing which I feel is really, really important. I think what it does is it makes you almost fall in love with the sport. If you're young, if you're 5, 6, 7, and you're constantly playing. That's what happened with me. I was fortunate enough to go to school in England in my formative years. I did my GCSEs there, so growing up all the way from primary school to secondary school. And what we used to do was, every lunch break, every recess, take the jumpers off, put them down for goalposts, and play football. And just the entire culture of sports in the UK, got me hooked. I'd get up at 5 in the morning to see the Olympics, to see football, to see matches. The fact that it was easily accessible on television, the fact that I could go and play, there were lots of fields. So all of these things helped. And I think along with the participation, what is required is willingness from the parents as well. So I know what you're doing, like you said, if this was a football match, you'd jump out of that car and run across the bridge.
I almost did for this as well, just to let you know that I wasn't being that biased, but yeah.
But yeah, I think if we can increase participation levels, even if it's just in the neighborhood park, that is something that will get the next generation interested and wanting to play the sport. And I think there's nothing more than wanting to go out there and play something to get the passion and the excitement levels up.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more from on the ground perspective. But as we all know, having the infrastructure and the organized competition is growing. I do think, like in our children's school, football is the game. I don't know how many of you are parents here, but how many of you think football is at the moment with kids today? Is it more popular than cricket? Does anyone here think it's more popular? Raise your hands if you think it's more. And if you think cricket's, Mama, you can also. And if you think cricket's more popular. Because see, this is the funny thing, that cricket, it's a cricket nation. But what one sees on the ground, when our kids' friends come over or whatever, they all go to play football. So I do think that whether it's also about the ease of the game, the shorter format, the quicker, and the fitness aspect. So not that I'm dissing cricket at all, but I do think that football's really coming up. But I'm going to come to Paul now, because as a professional footballer who played in England first and then in Asia, talking about infrastructure, because I have to admit, on the way here, I'm half Indian and half English. So every time I get annoyed about something in India, although I'm very much a Bombayite, I blame my mum. And I'm like, we love India, but look, here it's taking me 40 minutes to get to a talk that should have taken 10 minutes. And is this a reflection of something that we've got used to here, which may not be the case elsewhere? So would you like to tell us a little bit about infrastructure and, as a kid, how your passion for football allowed you to actually become professional? Do you think kids here would have that same opportunity if they're as passionate?
I think we had that chat the other day, didn't we, on a Zoom call, and you told me to be quiet, so I need to be careful what I say. It's my life, and it has been my life since I was 6, 7 years old. I've been involved with professional football clubs since the age of 6, 7, where I'd be training at certain clubs all over the country, in England. I was fortunate enough to play professionally, as you mentioned. I signed at 16 years old as an apprentice and managed to play for, it was about 8 years professionally in the UK before moving to Asia. And it's a sacrifice. It's a calling. It really is. It's nothing else matters. Just football. That's it. And I sacrificed, gave up everything just to try and chase my dreams. And I'm fortunate enough today to be sitting here and still involved in the game. I run football schools in Singapore and Malaysia. I run football facilities over there. I'm obviously working on the Hero Indian Super League. So I'm still involved in football now. So it's given me so much over these years. And there is a career path. But the infrastructure in England is, you're talking about generation after generation after generation. You're talking 100, 120 years of history, of heritage, of culture. And it's not going to happen overnight if you, in Asia, in certain countries in Asia, like India as well, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time to build and develop that understanding. Just to touch on something you said earlier about being popular at school football. Well, it was when I first came over here about 15, 20 years ago, the ratio was for every 10 school kids, 7 would play cricket. This is when I first came. 2 would play football, and 1 would play another sport, badminton, hockey, whatever. About 5, 6 years later, football moved to 6, cricket to 3, and 1 to other sports. Now, if that shift's happened 15, 20 years ago, and you're saying now it's getting stronger. So there is a culture here that's starting to develop that. Football's great for kids. It really, really is. It teaches you more than football. It teaches you life skills, how to be part of a team, how to work with people you don't like, how to work with people you like. It happens, it's life. Cricket is a little bit more individual because you're either a bowler or you're a batter. You're either going to take wickets or you're going to score runs. In football, if you don't do your job, you're going to get hammered. If you're playing with me and you're not doing your job, I'm going to get you in the changing room, I'm going to string you up. Because that's what happens. You have to do it as a team. So there is a real unity and togetherness. And with those stats just mentioned there, it just shows you how much football is moving on and moving forwards and developing. To go from 3 to 6 or 2 to 6 in 4 or 5 years, and it's getting stronger now, the infrastructure's coming. It's coming, but it takes time.
It takes time. So that's all of you have said, really, really interesting things. And coming now to you, Mukul, I'd like to hear what Tata Steel is doing for football. And as you, in fact, it's a great segue because we're talking about infrastructure, and you've been very, very much involved in building Jamshedpur FC and all the infrastructure there. So please tell us a little bit about that.
Thanks, Tara. Am I audible? Yeah. So typically, I think Tata Steel has been promoting sports in particular since over 100 years. It started with Mr. Dorab Tata, who actually first sponsored the Indian Olympic contingent in 1920 when British India was not wanting to send due to war reasons. But that's how old the promotion of sports goes with Tata Steel per se. And when it comes to football in particular, say about in 1945, we started the first league, which we just celebrated, JSA League for football, which celebrated 75 years some time back. If you notice, football is more there in the coastal region, and Jamshedpur is way inside. Having a league which was started 75 years pre-independence is a great contribution. Today we also have a women's league, and we also have football for transgenders, just to share with you, because that's something that I don't know many corporates are doing it or not, but we are doing that. Then in '82 we launched something called Super Soccer, when cricket was at its peak, and Super Soccer was basically best of world's club football, be it Sao Paulo, PSV Eindhoven, Bochum, coming to India and playing with best of Indian footballers. Now that was started way back in '82, and it was not a television product so much to say, but we had bought television time to broadcast it. So that's what Tata Steel has done for football per se. In '84 or '87 later, we launched Tata Football Academy. It's again a pioneering effort, which basically has seen 252 cadets which have passed out from the academy. 150 have played for the country. As we speak today, there are little over 28 numbers playing in ISL. I don't know if any other academy or any other institution would have contributed so much to Indian football, and just I missed that point, but 19 captains in various age groups as far as international football is concerned. So amazing work, and typically coming to 2017 when we launched Jamshedpur Football Club, we just thought it was coming to age as far as football is concerned, and we thought it was right to step in at that moment, and there we are now, helping football grow further. And we really want to bet on it, and we feel that it's just evolving like everybody else is betting on, I think. And just to clarify, there's a lot to learn from cricket, the way it has commercialized the sport. I think, as I've been in football for a little over 17 years, but I think there's a lot to learn from cricket, what they have done in terms of commercializing the sport, making it sustainable. Cricket had its own bad time, guys. So they used to buy television time to broadcast television cricket matches. So it has seen its own bad times, and what it is today is what we see, but what it has gone through and the contribution from the administrators then and the marketeers then has been immense. And we have seen just the rich football, that's the rich cricket that we see now, but it has done its own bit to get here.
Absolutely. And again, having read in the book that I think in the book they actually begin with, I didn't know this, and again I'm coming at this as a lay person, that in the 50s, India was really up there with football, and there were the golden era of football, and I think that's something that many people don't know, right? Because we think of ourselves as a cricketing nation, and I think it's post the '83 World Cup win when cricket became huge, and people really took it seriously because of a huge win. So the reality is, in any competitive sport, when you do well, people take note, right? So coming to the World Cup, FIFA, I think the book has been well timed for the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. So how far are we? And I'm saying this as the mom of, honestly, 2 kids who love football, one who I think really does want to go, I don't know, we never say professional because we don't know what the opportunities really are. But how far do you really think India is from qualifying for the World Cup? And what do you think we can do to get there? Quick, Gaurav.
All right. I honestly think, it could be anything from 12 to 20 to 30 years before we qualify, but a lot has to happen, I think, before we get there. I was having a conversation with, a youth development coach about a week or so ago, and he said that to qualify for a FIFA World Cup, we've got to start looking at the 4-year-olds of today, because by the time that they reach their peak, that is when possibly we could be in a position to qualify. And the reason he said that is that you've got to catch them young. Grassroots, we hear that word a lot, but what exactly is grassroots? Grassroots is catching them really, really young at the age of 4, 5, and nurturing them, getting the basics of football right by the time they turn 8 or 9. And by the time you're 8 or 9, grassroots is over. After that starts youth development and putting that structure in place. And what Mukul said, I think, is really important, because having a structure and a competitive structure, as I was mentioning earlier as well, is really key. And that's what cricket did really, really well. After cricket became popular, '83 World Cup lit the spark. Then we hosted a World Cup in India in '87, which sort of took it that, it spread the awareness of cricket even more. 5 years after that, another very important event happened, which was the opening up of the Indian economy. And what that did was it brought the money in. It made cricket commercial. It allowed the BCCI to sell the cricket rights. And because they could sell those cricket rights, they started making money, which they then, started pumping into the game. And that sort of led to a pipeline of talent developing. They not only looked at just the senior teams, but they looked at the development and the creation of competitive structure at all age groups, which is why, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but the Indian under-19 teams tend to do really well at World Cups. We've won numerous under-19 World Cups in cricket. Why have we done that? Because the under-11, under-12, under-13, under-14 players, by the time they get to that under-19 level, have been playing competitively and playing together. So the head coach of the under-19 team has a pool of about 400-500 players from all around the country. Now, let me give you the example of football. 5 years ago, we hosted the under-17 FIFA World Cup. 2 years before that tournament, a group of about 25-30 kids were picked up and trained. So the Indian football coach at that point in time for that tournament only had 25 or 30 kids. Now, 2 years is a long time. You could go out of form, you could get injured, you could lose interest in the game because you're still young, right? You're 15, 16 years old. In cricket, that doesn't happen because you've been playing competitive cricket from the age of 11, 12, 13, 14, all the way onwards. So that competitiveness and playing at a high standard and having a much larger pool is something that's already there. In football, that's what we need to create. So when we have the next under-17 World Cup where our team qualifies, the coach should have a pool of about maybe 300, 400 kids to choose from. And that is where, the clubs are really important as well. Jamshedpur FC, running programs within their catchment areas. If we can do that for maybe the, 200 odd clubs that are there in this country, you will then find that talent. And that talent is what's going to then propel you to a World Cup. So, but obviously there's a lot of other steps along the way as well. Infrastructure is one of them. And, in Mumbai, whenever I come here, I'm fascinated because over the last 10 odd years, just the mushrooming of all the, the cage footballs and the turfs that have been laid is just fascinating to see. Places like Bangalore, Delhi, we're seeing that. And I know when Paul first came here, in the early 2000s, that was one of the, main remits for him, which was to get kids playing and laying all these turfs. So a lot is happening, but a lot more still needs to be done before we can think about actual qualification.
Okay, that's great to know. But again, as an eternal optimist, because our kids are 11 and 13, I don't want to feel like we've missed the boat. And I think personally, and again, I'm speaking as a layperson, but because on my show, the Tara Sharma show, I have had the honor of having some really wonderful, inspirational guests. And I happen to have Chetri on the show. And he spoke about how his initial football training happened with his mom. And I've also been there, done that a little bit. So, and I think he started very young, but someone like Bumrah spoke about cricket actually happening to him much later, and him just playing in his house and, not really starting at 6 or 7 or 8, but I think with him it happened quite a bit later. I say that because even like one of my best friends yesterday, when I mentioned this talk, she was like, oh, but Taru, football in India, we're still like, our kids are not going to have that opportunity. And because I'm living it as a mom, I want to know that that opportunity could happen sooner rather than later. I'm not talking about World Cup necessarily, but I'm talking about, opportunities that are as exciting. So coming again to you, Paul, in the UK, right? It's not that everyone is only vying for the national team, right? You've got all the clubs, you've got all the excitement. I think, again, I don't know enough, but while our son plays for Barca Elite here, he's a huge Chelsea supporter. Our other son's a huge Liverpool supporter. And I think club football, aspiration for that is as much, right? So I'd like to know, because here we tend to focus, even with cricket, it's about the Indian team or the football Indian team or, poaching for the main team. But the reality is, with a population of our size, we need more opportunities which are as exciting and as lucrative, right? So whether it's club football or whatever else, so that the kids know that it's not only those 11 that are going to be the, you know what I mean? Because,
the structure's there though, isn't it? Because you've got the Premier League now. You've just mentioned there, everybody has a Premier League club.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with supporting a Premier League club, but why can't you support your local Indian club?
Yeah.
Why doesn't everyone here go down and watch Mumbai City?
Yeah.
Why? Why?
Yeah.
You all love Liverpool, you all love Man United, you love this, but you've got to give something back, and you've got to go and support what's yours. Like I said, England has this infrastructure for many, many years. You've got Premier League, you've got Championship, Division 1, 2. That's the start. That's 92 professional clubs. Professional. Then you go down the pyramids, and you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds all over the country of non-league teams. Whenever I go back to the UK, I go and pay my £5 to go and watch the local, excuse me, the local football team play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they need support. So you go, you buy some food and have a drink in the clubhouse. You watch a game it's not brilliant, but it's a game of football that's fun. And you contribute by giving back that way. And that's, I think, what Gaurav was mentioning earlier, to have that sort of infrastructure. We've got the professional clubs now in the Hero ISL. Yes, okay, if you're looking at 20 players per team, we're talking 220 to 250 professional players. The I-League's now started, so that number now doubles. So the national team coach has 500 players to select from. When it happens and when things go on, you'll get your second division if they merge and they come together, and then a third division, then another division. All of a sudden, the national team coach has 2,000 players to select from.
Yeah.
And again, all these clubs have that infrastructure for the youth, and there will be a clear pathway. But it just, like I said, and I know I might sound like a, excuse me, I might sound like a broken record. It takes time. It doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah.
But it's definitely coming.
No, and what's really important is, because the ISL has come, then you've got the I-League, then you've got Division 2. It's opened up more slots, right? So I think the direct question that you asked is the opportunity out there for a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old? Absolutely. I'll give you an example from the start of the ISL. I've given this example before as well. And I won't name the player here, but he was a young player playing in the first season of the ISL back in 2014. He was from the Northeast. And he was playing for that club. He was on a yearly contract of 6 lakh rupees. And that's it. This is back in 2014. He could have been doing something else, earning much more than that, double that probably if he had gone to school. But he felt passionate about the sport, and luckily he was from a region which is, really football forward, if I can use that word. He did well. He played about 6-7 matches, scored a couple of goals. The next season, he got signed up by another club in the Hero ISL. He was transferred, and he immediately got a contract of 40 lakh rupees a year. This was in 2015. So within a year, his life changed. Probably people in his village back in Northeast, their life changed. Today, a young player, and Mukul can probably talk more about this without divulging figures, of course. There are young players that are coming through the system who are now earning decent amount of money, where for parents who see that, and their neighbors and maybe within the catchment area or within the village, they see that they've actually made a viable career option for themselves. More than just the yearly contracts, players are now signing multi-year deals, 3-year contracts, 4-year contracts. That's giving them stability as well, along with the money coming in. And with that, what's happening, and this is happening not just in football, it's happening across sports. Look at the number of professional leagues that have come up in India in the last 10 years. You've got kabaddi, you've got volleyball, you've got table tennis. All of these are, avenues to make a career in sports, and a very viable one as well. And once you finish that, then there are opportunities beyond that as well. Once your playing days are over, you could potentially get into coaching, you could look into the management side of things, you could how to run a club. So I think the opportunity, to answer your question, in short, definitely there.
That's great to know. And again, I didn't realize because without being cliched, the reality is for most Indian parents, and I say this because as we spoke about, there's not such a football culture here yet, right? So for most parents, what happens is after a certain age, like even for someone like me, I say that right now our kids can balance both. A younger one spends over an hour in the car back and forth each day just to get to his football academy, but he's passionate about it, so does it. At the moment, the point is that, okay, he can manage this and school. But as a dear friend who is really into football said, you should soon be asking, is school interfering with the football, if the passion is so strong? So the reality is, as a culture, Mukul, do we, as Indian parents, do you think there needs to be more awareness about the fact that this could be a viable profession which is lucrative? Because I also didn't know about these kind of, salaries. And I think, at the moment, for most parents, it's still about the academics, right? They still think that this is what you have to do. I mean, love my in-laws, but even my own in-laws initially said, oh, I mean, you always update us about sport. What about academics? But for me, my view is academics are always going to be fine, but sport is what differentiates, even when it comes to your university admissions or whatever else. So would you like to tell us a little bit about how maybe to encourage parents to support the sport more by giving them the reassurance that there's also lucrative prospects?
So yeah, just to add to what Gaurav has mentioned, football is very, very lucrative. In fact, sometimes I feel that most of the players are a little overpaid than what they should be. The reason being, and that's the reason again for that.
He's a club CEO, by the way, so he's got to control the checkbook.
It's not just that. I'm saying from the point of view of cricket being lucrative because there's money coming from various sources, and therefore you funding the sport, and that sport becoming a good business being one. Then there is football where the money is not coming in, but you're paying high salaries because there's lack of good talent and lesser number of players. That is basically more of a demand and supply thing, and that's why most of the academies would come into play and youth system. I would just want to point out a few points here, wherein a 6-year-old in Brazil or Europe is not very different from a 6-year-old in India. What happens in his life between 6 and 16, which actually defines whether he wants to be into professional sport or not. We have not been doing it right so far. There's a good amount of stress that has been given on grassroots and youth football now, and it's growing and it's getting better. But you need a larger pool of young youth players who are very much there and who continue the sport. Coming to your question with regards to education, I have a feeling that we lose a lot of sporting talent to education. There are a lot of good sports person who do really well when they are actually you work hard on them. I've seen grassroots for quite some time now, and you work hard on them when they are 10-year-olds and they are 14-year-olds and come to 15 and they're into 10th and 11th, and the parents don't want them to do that anymore. You have invested 8 years of your time. It's a good number of time that you have spent on them, or 5 years of your time, and suddenly this boy is not available for you anymore. I think that's what needs to change. It is lucrative, whether you do it purely for money and passion, because not everybody will be able to make it to the ISL, because of course there's a pyramid, and you can make more accountants than you can make footballers, because it's a more safer career to say. But having said that, it is a challenging thing. It is lucrative. We need to work at the grassroots levels, see to it that we give right kind of training at the right age. See, it's no rocket science. What we do with academics is what we need to treat any other sport of football. If we spend 14 years to make a doctor and an engineer, you have to think at least 8 to 10 years to make a footballer. You can't train him for 4 years and 3 years and say, hey, you will be a footballer. Now that's what has been happening also while, and I think the culture is so little changing now, and I see that with so many people, and particularly parents who are now taking so much interest. They want their parents, particularly you, Tara, when we were speaking the other day, and I realized that even when I was running a soccer school myself, and one realized that the amount of efforts the parents are taking now to bring their kids to the sport, traveling hour one way, 2 ways, 2 hours. It's a great effort, but I'm saying it all will pay off, and I think the culture is just about building. We'll have a larger pool in time to come, and I think football is the next big thing to happen to India, which is I personally believe. It might take a while. It might not be wise to say whether we'll play the World Cup immediately or not. If you have to think World Cup, we have to think 20 years from now, not because of anything else. We have to work like Gaurav was mentioning. You have to start working on the 4-year-olds and the 5-year-olds. If you want to make somebody a Messi and a Ronaldo, don't think 2 years and 3 years and you can do that. It is a long-term thing. So I think it's a matter of time, and we'll get there.
Just one thing I'd add is also, I think we get so caught up, and you said earlier, the World Cup. It's once every 4 years for the men, once every 4 years for the women. But I think what's more important, and as growing up is well, for me, it was the relationship I had, my mom and dad had, my brother had with the sport. So, my mom is from a small town in Gujarat called Jagadia. My dad is from a village in Gujarat called Kashipura. But from the age of 4 onwards, they were at every one of my matches, cutting oranges, giving me pep talks, hanging out with the other American parents, traveling to cities. It was never about watching me play for the US or India one day. It was always about the relationship we had with the sport. I met a woman, Gwenda, there. She's she's playing for Young Guns, I believe. She walked in with so much excitement. A friend here, he's a Leicester City fan, and he loves his club and his relationship. He didn't want to talk about World Cup. I have a bunch of my students studying sports management, their masters, and they're all dream of contributing to the growth of football. They play, but they also study the business of sports. So I don't think it's about the World Cup. The World Cup is a bonus. It comes every 4 years for 1 month. But it is about how do we create an ecosystem where all of us can connect with the sport in a meaningful, engaging way. That's all that matters. I've been working, when I couldn't play professionally, I did my MBA in sports business. And then I got a job with Major League Soccer. And for 20 years, I've traveled the world representing soccer. I got to be instead of playing for Liverpool, I was the CEO of the Liverpool Academies. Wow. Where I was training young players who are playing in the ISL now and giving them an environment to be at their best potential. And I was bringing coaches from the UK into India and taking coaches from India to England. So when I look at life in football, I feel like how you integrate football into every aspect of my life, not just once every 4 years, but every day.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really well put, all of you, because as I said, over the last couple of years, that's happened to us, I think, as a family. I'd also like to say, and this is not intended to gloat, but it's just the reality is a few months ago when our younger one was selected to go and play in the Singa Cup, which is the Singapore Youth International Tournament with his Barca elite squad. Quite honestly, everyone said, oh, it's a great opportunity, but India never gets through or anything. We went, they won all their first 4 matches. 1 was a walkover, 3 they won, so they were top of their group table. They went into the quarters. It was nail-biting, to say the least. We were down, we were 0, the other team was 2, Indonesia. Then it went to 2-2, then 3-2, then penalties, and we won. They beat Australia, which apparently was not something that they expected. Went into the semis, and I can't even tell you what it did for all the players from all the different Barca academies, because they all came to cheer, and it was like a big thing, So for us, it's really encouraged us to go to do more for the sport. So I think what I read even in the book is about organized competition being so important, because the minute you recognize that it's a feeling, right? Like you have it, you said it was your calling and it was in you. As parents as well, and we're encouraging them, when you feel it, and I've never seen that, like I didn't know these parents because it's a team from all over. There's no one else would have been stuck on the ceiling. So basically there was no one from South Bombay, just to put it like that. But you're again, without being a martyr about it, it's such a leveler and it's such a unifier, because the emotion is the same, right? So on a larger scale, coming to what you do touch upon in the book, about what sport and football can do even politically. For a country like India, as we've seen cricket has done, right? Whether it comes to India, Pakistan, whatever it is, we're competing, but there's also a shared love, right? So what do you think India will gain from football politically?
I think that, see, in 1983, when we won the Cricket World Cup, it was not a surprise that everyone at any level would want to be associated with that. The national fervor and excitement and passion and love for India at that time was so high that the media, the editors, the politicians, the corporates, they would all want to quickly latch onto that. In any country, the major stakeholders and decision makers want to latch onto what's bringing a lot of national pride. Right now, our Indian national team unfortunately hasn't been, nor is the culture of football across the country is not bringing a lot of the the influencers out and attaching themselves to it. Now we see Bollywood stars, yes, a couple of them, some are. Now we see a couple of corporates like Reliance or Tata or others doing that. But maybe the Prime Minister, when the World Cup is being hosted here, they do it for a little bit and then it kind of moves away. if we qualify for a FIFA World Cup, in my opinion, and I've seen it in other countries, and I believe that it could actually be the most unifying force of India, more than Bollywood and more than politics. The Indian national team doing well in a FIFA World Cup could actually connect the entire country together politically, psychologically, culturally, even certain classes at that time could all come together and really celebrate this. So I feel like that's where politicians would want to align themselves with something of this magnitude that can actually excite the hearts of so many Indians across all different religions and all different kind of classes and regions. So that's my very idealistic. I'm also an eternal optimist. I believe it. We tried in chapter 2 to describe and illustrate that sentiment as best we can. I think we did a pretty good job, I hope. But ultimately, I really feel that this is possible one day.
That
And I'd just like to add to what Neel was saying. Just add to what Neel was saying with regards to. So he spoke about what it can do internally for us within India. I think what it can do outside of India for us as well. With all due respect to cricket and some of the other sports like kabaddi, I mean, a handful of nations actually play them, right? When we won the first World Cup that India did back in '83, I think there were 8 teams taking part in the entire tournament. Football, you've got 200 nations trying to qualify. You've got 48 slots from the next FIFA World Cup in 2026. 48 teams will actually qualify for that tournament. So from that standpoint, I think what it does for the country externally is absolutely fantastic as well. It puts you on what I call a truly global stage. For me, the FIFA World Cup along with the Olympics are truly world events in that sense, if I was to look at it. And I think qualification for that is something. Now, when a FIFA World Cup comes around, and I've worked in the ISL now for nearly a decade, and one conversation we always have in our conference rooms, when we're talking about the number of people watching, the interest levels, what more can we do, how can we grow the sport in India, the one thing we always sort of reference against is every 4 years when a FIFA World Cup comes, the interest levels go through the roof. It becomes water cooler conversation at offices, at colleges, because everyone wants to be updated about it. No one wants to go into lunch or for a drink with their friends not knowing what happened last night. People will stay up late till 2 o'clock in the morning, depending on where the World Cup is taking place. And that level of interest, is something that I can see happening if India qualifies. I think everybody, whether you're a football fan or not, you will feel a sense of pride because you are one of those 200 countries that have tried and fought to qualify for a FIFA World Cup, and then you finally made it. So I think that when it happens, I mean, as far as a cricket World Cup is concerned, India doesn't need to qualify, right? It's already there. We know when the next cricket World Cup comes, we are going to be there. There's no jeopardy. There's nothing that you're really fighting for. With the FIFA World Cup, I mean, we know sitting on this panel, what really needs to happen, what all the road the rocky road that exists, and when you then finally do achieve it, the satisfaction from that and the sense of pride is going to be absolutely immense.
And that's great. That's great to know. And Paul, coming to something that's a little bit again more laypersonish, when it comes to things like poaching, right? Now again, when you're picking players for teams, no, sorry, I'm coming to you because you have the experience of being a player as
poached.
well. Yeah, so I'm just curious because. So football, of course, is very much a team sport, as you said, right? So while cricket is too, the reality is football, it's all about the team. So what I notice, again, referring back to going far to practice and all, it's about working as a team. And then you put those same players in a team that may not be as well coordinated, and however good that player is, the team may not do well, right? So I want to understand a little bit about this because I have a little hands-on experience of players being poached just before a big district level tournament, and suddenly young kids are playing against their teammates. And so how does that work? Because we talk a lot about how football or all sport is also a mental game, right? So after a point, talent and hard work take you there. And then that mental part, what can we really do for that mental part? Because I've never really understood what that means. Like even now in Singapore, the coach would say, you know, it's in the mind, it's in the mind. And I did notice that our team, even though they were down 0-2, they didn't get phased. When the Indonesians, when it became 3-3, the goalie started crying. Something happened. Our guys suddenly got tougher. Yeah. I mean, okay, they're 11, but, you know, it happened, yeah. So something happened mentally which made them stronger. And so what can you do for that? Because we talk a lot about mental health, but in a sports context, what can we do?
Where to start? The poaching bit, I would say possibly, if you've got a player that stands out in the team and the team isn't great, and there's another team that is playing better football, you want to play with that team because you want to better yourselves because you want to win. Now that comes down to the mental aspect of the game as well, which is a mental state. You want to win. If you don't want to play football to win, don't play. It's as simple as that.
But
you have to play
when does
to win.
the team become bigger than the person?
No one's ever bigger. No one's ever bigger than the team.
But
the
then,
team and the name of the team, and that team will be the main focal point always.
But
individuals, you can't legislate for individuals. Now, whether that's kids, whether it's adults, whether it's seniors, whether it's somebody, Ronaldo wanting to force a move, no one's bigger than the team. He's not bigger than Manchester United. No chance. So what happens? You have to move him on. And it's a question of whether you push, whether you run, or whether you just take yourself out of the equation. But you can't, no one's bigger than a club, a team. That's the first thing. You can't legislate for individuals. Now, if somebody may want to move because their best mate plays there, or they're winning more games, or we've got a rubbish goalkeeper, or these are the things that go through kids' heads. I've seen it. And I've had players come and play for my academy, and I've had players go and leave my academy. But more players wanted to come, but we can pick and choose who we wanted to come. That then becomes another problem and another aspect and another difference of what it is. So what you have to do is you have to build your tiers, like we said. So we'd have an elite team, we'd have a club team, and we would have a for fun team. So I had 30 players instead of 10. And that's vitally important. And then you can move up and down in the pyramid there. If somebody comes in, you bring them in at that level, you move somebody down. Football is, it's the best game in the world. But I can promise you, at times, it is horrible. Because you're always, as a player, you're always looking over your shoulder. Because no matter whether you're 16, you're 18, you break into the first team, my God, there's a young kid coming through who's not bad, he's going to take my place. You've got to try and make what you can and do what you can for as long as you can. So you're always looking over your shoulder, and that's why you have to be mentally strong. If you're not, you crumble, you will not succeed. You won't succeed at that level. So you have to have that mental strength and that belief in yourself when nothing else matters. That's why I said to you before, sacrifice my life for football. Because that's all I know. It's all I could do. Because I'm always looking over my shoulder. Because I know somebody else is setting up another team in Malaysia that could compete against mine. I don't want that. I want the best team. So you're always aware of what's going on around you. But you have to have, each individual has to have that mental strength.
Okay, that's very
Coaching
good.
isn't bad.
Sorry?
Coaching isn't bad. It just shows that there is interest,
Yep.
and it shows that the player
it's
being
good.
coached is actually good.
It's very good. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm saying just as I guess because I don't know how strict people are about contracts and stuff. I guess that happens when you're older. At a younger age, I'm surprised they even have to sign things at this age, but it doesn't seem that that's that strict. They move. But anyway, that's another, so.
I'll just assure you that football is fairly regulated, and trust me, this is how the game is. And typically, it's not very easy. I would not use the word poaching, it's a transfer. And since it's because poaching makes it sound really, really negative, it is just that typically you and I may have a long career of 40 years. A footballer has a career of say about 10, 12, 14 years max, and he has a peak of 3 to 5 years, and within that he has to make the money for his rest of his life. He gets the best contracts, he makes the best decision. Whether he should be with the team, of course he should be with the team. We as fans would want to follow a certain team, be it Ronaldo, Messi, and we want them, we realize, we recognize them along with their clubs. But I think it's a professional decision that they make, and we'll have to just go with that.
Yeah, when it gets to that level, yes. When it gets to the professional level, you have to look after yourself because, Michael's right, your career is such a short span and you have to make what you can when you can.
Yeah.
Because once you finish playing, it's the hardest thing ever. To be in a dressing room one day with 25, 30 people, having fun, having banter, going out and training, you're coming back, you're going out for coffee, you're meeting all the families, all the wives, and then the season finishes and you go away and then you don't go back the next season because you're finished. You wonder why certain players lose the plot a little bit and do have mental issues when they've stopped playing, because you miss that environment so much and you can never get it back. So you have to do, that's where again that mentality, the selfishness which comes with football has to come into play.
But speaking of the selfishness, also again for any parents out there who might be watching, I think what you all alluded to, apart from what you learn in the sport or the profession you could have in the sport, I think it teaches so much else. Again, only because I refer only to the examples that I know, when I watch our younger one often spend time on the bench. Initially as a parent, it was hard, standing for 4 hours in the Bombay heat and waiting for your kid to play, but supporting the whole team. You would be, don't say anything, and of course you never say anything to a coach. And it just struck me, for them it's all about the team at a very young age, which is such an amazing learning, because there are not many things that teach you that. And then when the coaches know you're ready to play, you actually really do well. So I think there's a lot also to be said about all the other careers that come out of being part of football. So even if you don't go the full professional football route, as for you as coaches and educators or journalists, or even today my husband was saying, now companies like McKinsey or whatever, when you're trying to differentiate an application one from the other, the minute you've seen a kid has also played for this and that and whatever, it adds that whole other dimension, and the world knows the other stuff it teaches you. So as a parent, I will definitely say from everything I've learned from the book and talking to all of you, I think it's clear that all of us as lay people can do our bit with raising awareness on how important it is to encourage kids and not hold them back. And I'd like to just ask Mukul one thing about fan culture and how important fans are, because as we've all said, while England has a huge culture of football, we also see a lot of fights, there's also a lot of negative press, right, about football fans and not going to pubs at certain times of the evening, because especially after a match it could be dangerous, right? So what do you have to say about fans?
Fans is the most critical element, or rather they are the element for any kind of sport, be it cricket, football, any other sport. Unless you have an audience and animated fan which is standing behind you, it just puts that pressure on you. It just makes you feel, when you actually score a goal, you can't, like for example, recently we were playing this in Goa, you score a goal and you suddenly go and celebrate to an empty audience, you don't know where to look, and nobody's praising, cheering, clapping for you, and you just go and hit a ball. So fans are the most important element, and that's what makes this sport different all over the world. I have a story to share, but it's slightly long, so I wouldn't. I have shared it with you. But I think it's typically, I have seen the sport grow from what it is today to what it was once upon a time when we were playing in I-League and games, and we had 22 players on the field in the middle of heat because the infrastructure wasn't right, so you could play only when the sunlight is there, and it's afternoon 3 o'clock that you're playing a game at Cooperage, and it's really suboptimal, because after 20 minutes, after you sweated it out all, it's just crazy playing that game. You can't be running at 40 kilometers an hour speed kind of a thing, and you had less than 11 players on the stadium, and you have played in that kind of hostile environment. I'm using the word hostile here. And from that to what we see right now with ISL, we actually have traveled distance. Of course, there's a long way to go, but when you see now 20,000, 40,000, 80,000 people on the stands, it's really amazing, and great contribution for everybody who's there in the sport, and many clubs that have been working hard, and of course the audience, the way it's come up and warming up to the sport, it's just wonderful. Now I think it will just help us get better. With so much of people following you, so much of writing that is happening on you, it will put pressure on the system, of course the administrators, the clubs, the players, everybody involved, and I think it will only help the game get better and excel where we know all want it to be. So I think it's just a matter of time. Since I've seen that part of the world 14, 15 years back to what we see now, I think we have come a very long way, very long way. 11 to for 80,000 is a big number.
And just to quantify what Mukul is saying, I was recently seeing an internal graphic at the ISL, which was to do with stadia attendance this season. And this is after 2 years of playing behind closed doors because of the COVID pandemic. And the ISL currently is the highest stadia attended league in all of Asia, with 17,500 being the average attendance. And the other beautiful thing that we are now seeing, and Mukul can attest to as well, and Paul as well, is that we are seeing a culture of away fans, which means that fans from a particular city are traveling to another city. I was just in Bangalore 2 nights ago, and East Bengal FC were playing against Bengaluru. And there were at least 500 to 600 die-hard East Bengal fans who had made the journey from Kolkata, who were sitting in Bangalore, who were watching that match, singing, and for them the passion, and there was an Instagram story shared in our internal group, which you're aware of, Paul. There was this one particular fan who had a megaphone. He didn't watch the match. He was facing the stand, just riling up the rest of the East Bengal fans and getting them excited and getting them to sing their songs. And we captured it on the broadcast, and we put that story out on our digital handles and stuff. And now we're going to track that fan down and do shoot like a 5-minute feature with him. Because fans, as Mukul said, are the lifeblood of the sport. And in football, the kind of tribalism you see, the kind of passion that you see, wanting to buy the jersey and wanting that particular jersey in that color, wanting to then buy the away jersey as well, is something that is very unique to football. And this away culture that I spoke about is so healthy for the sport. So, and as a league, the amount of hours that we put in to try and engage with our fans, whether it's on the broadcast, whether it's on our digital handles, and Neel comes from that background as well, having worked in the US, and it's so important for the growth of the sport. It's not just the players. Finding the players and having them play is one thing, but then getting people to come out there and support them and encourage them is just as important.
Absolutely.
You didn't know it was so complicated, did you?
No,
I just thought
we
that
were
you turned up and
screaming and
played
shouting.
football.
Yeah. And oh my God, I don't even want to get into the question of, God forbid, injuries, but let's not go there. But I think it's also important. Again, when we were on our way back from Singapore, we happened to be sitting next to a doctor. And when I said, oh, he's just come from playing this game, he said, oh, that's great. I'm in the business of fixing faces. I said, oh gosh, I don't want to know about that. But the truth is that I don't know if it's true, but I feel like if they're trained well with these good academies and really good coaches, I hope it means that the risk potential is less. Because I find actually with a really good football match, maybe at the younger age, it's like a choreographed dance. They know how to pass. It's literally the way the possession of the ball and all that. I see that happening more than banging into each other, at least so far, I hope.
It's not like that when you're at the professional level, let me tell you.
I thought it got better.
But what I'm saying is that the game has evolved and the game has changed. I mean, when I was playing early 90s, mid 90s, then, I've got cuts and fractures and teeth missing from having played because it was a tough, rough, physical game.
But now it's not, right?
It's not. The game. That's why I say the game has evolved. The game has evolved, and now you can't touch somebody without them falling over, and the referee will give a free kick.
Yeah.
So that the rules, because it's got faster, it's got more technical, it's got quicker, it's got better, and it has compared with when I was playing. Because of that technical aspect, it's so much faster now. The game is just about pace. If you've got pace and you're quick, you excite people. You can make things happen when you're on the football pitch. So the days of losing your teeth, or yes, you're going to get a clash of heads once in a while when people go up for headers and you might have a few stitches. That happens, but no more elbows or anything like that, and that's all gone.
That's good to know. That's good to know. And a big shout out, I think, also to the coaches. I have to say, I've observed a respect that I don't think I'd seen I shouldn't say this, but even with school teachers, to be honest.
Do you know something? Do you know, kids actually respect the coaches more than they do the school teachers.
That's what I'm saying.
100%.
Like I don't want to say this if it's broadcast live because they respect their school teachers.
I'll say it. I'll say it. The reason is
No,
the kids want to play football, so they
Yeah.
want to listen and they want to learn.
Yeah.
Kids don't want to go to school, so they don't want to listen to the teacher. That is the truth.
And
So
my gosh, if you're a parent who's gone all across the world to support a match and you think they'd be happy if the coaches are around there, go. I mean, they're happy if you're cheering, but they don't want you around the team and all that. So again, wonderful learnings. I'm very grateful to all of you who've also helped to bring these global academies and Indian academies in that have made it so much more professional. I think that's done a lot. It's not like, oh, I may go for football. It's like, this is the time I have to be there. I'll be there 10 minutes early, and I've not witnessed that for many things. So thank you, and thank you to all the coaches. I say this for Basa Elite because I'm really impressed by how they've been running it, and I know for Mumbai City and Jamshedpur and all of them. So just one last thing about women's football, and then I'll let people ask questions because I think we've gone over time. I think in the book you both mentioned that you think that the senior World Cup for men will happen after it happens for women. So do you want to tell us a little bit about women's football and where you think it's at?
Yeah, I mean, real quick, the women's football has been neglected in India. Let's not deny that fact. Men's football was somewhat neglected. Women's football was really neglected. Still is. Things are happening. There's a league called the IWL, Indian Women's League. We just hosted in India the U17 World Cup for women, which was a big deal. But it's going to take a long time till we see the kind of growth and investment that we want on the women's side. That being said, we talk about it in the book. There are incredible human beings that are out in India right now in places in Dharvi, places in South Bombay, places in Jamshedpur, places in Delhi, places in Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, who are only focused on women's football. And even the small investment that they're making, we're seeing transformational impact. Young women in India are giving their life through these programs. They're getting their life. And then they're traveling around the world playing, they're representing their national teams. And even that gives so much encouragement that a little bit of money in the women's game can make a huge difference. The second part of it is the competitive landscape in Asia. So real quick, to qualify for a FIFA World Cup, you have to be one of the best in your region, AFC in this case, Asian Football Confederation. So for our women, so the Asian landscape, because that includes the Middle East and also Australia. So when you're up against, on the men's side, the likes of Japan, Australia, Iran, whoever it might be, it's a very difficult landscape. Our women's team, when you put them up against some of the best in Asia, they can hold their own, actually. They can find a way. The competitive landscape is a little different. So our hope is that the women's national team, through more investment, more focused, more confidence, and more international support, weaken or powerfully get their way into one of the future senior FIFA World Cups. And I think that's going to help explode the kind of participation and excitement for young girls to play football. And I saw it in America, and I really believe it could happen tenfold here in India.
And very quickly, we've already spoken about, I think, how football can take a leaf out of cricket's book. And I think very recently what the BCCI did by making equal pay for women cricketers as well, I think is a step in the right direction. It's happened, in other countries as far as their football teams are concerned, national teams. I think the AIFF can once again take a leaf out of the BCCI's book here. And if, like Neel said, if we can provide the same sort of platform, the same sort of competitiveness and infrastructure and investment within the women's game, no reason why they can't get to a World Cup very, very quickly.
Just to add and mention about this, I can't be doing justice if I don't say this, but Tata Steel is just about to launch the first women's residential football academy, just on the lines of Tata Football Academy that was launched 30 years back. And one will see this in another year's time. So as we speak, the ground is being laid and stuff is being done. So cheers to the fairer sex.
That's great. And you see, as a girl, I'm very thrilled about that. But as a mother of boys, I also hear, oh, they won, but their competition is so much easier than ours. right? So that happens a lot too, because I think, as you said, right, the pool is a lot bigger when it comes to boys. So I think supporting both, and this is something I feel very strongly about for anything. When we talk about, it's about equalizing the scales and not pushing it in either direction. I feel that's really important, because I think sometimes there becomes a focus very much on girls. I see this sometimes because it's like pushing up underdog kind of mentality, and sometimes then the boys get neglected. So I think it's really important to maintain that balance, because the reality is the competition level is higher. I see it in the inter-school. I won't even get to inter-school football, because that's a whole different zone where they've not been trained as a team. They're going out and playing how we did when we were kids, which was just like meeting the week before and then going and playing and getting like hammered. But again, it's part of the learning, right? You learn to lose, and you learn to do okay, you learn to win. So on that note, thank you all so much. It's been such a pleasure. I hope I've redeemed myself from my delayed arrival, sorry. But thank you very much. Really a lovely chat. And if there's anything you'd like to say as a closing, as a closing comment.
Real fast, and it comes to what you were talking about earlier, is that we are actually all in it together to help football grow. Cricket, because of the heroes of Kapil Dev and those in 1983 won, then kept going. We kept winning World Cups. We just got to be supporters watching our heroes beat the best in the world. But football is different. There's 200 plus countries playing. India doesn't have the full culture just yet. So this title, Awakening the Blue Tigers, which I'll give full credits to Gaurav for. The Indian national team nickname is Blue Tigers. The women's national team is the Blue Tigresses. And Awakening the Blue Tigers, in the book we talk a lot about, we are all Blue Tigers. It's not just the guys or the women who play and don our national flag. It's you, it's all of my students over here. It's everyone who's sitting here listening to us babble on for the last little while about football in India. So we have to do our part to set up the academies, to take our kids to training, to be coaches, to be, the kind of people out here who are, public faces talking about the game, or CEOs of clubs. So if we want to make it to the World Cup, if we want to see football culture grow, we all have to wake up, actually, and do our little part to make it happen. And I think it's more fun that way, because you watch our team win and lose in cricket, you feel good or you feel sad. But when you actually helped make the team get there one day and create that culture, you feel so much more a part of it. And it's a challenge worth taking on. I can promise you that. I've given 20 years of my life to it, as these gentlemen have. It's the best feeling in the entire world. Every little success is worthwhile. So I think we should all feel like we're part of the Blue Tigers journey.
Any other closing comments?
What I would say is that, as Neel was also mentioning, there's a reason why football is called the beautiful game. It's so simple at heart. When I grew up or was growing up, just take your jumper off, take your sweater off, put it down. You've got goalposts, you've got one ball, and off you go. Whether it was in the street outside the house, whether it was in the school playground, whether it was in the park, it was just the easiest thing to play, the easiest thing to watch. It's not very complicated. I know, we've now got VAR and video assistant referees, and it's slightly more complicated than what it was, but it's still one of the easiest sports to understand, to follow. And what I would encourage everybody to do is just go out there and support your local team. Whether it's, a team in the Mumbai District Football Association, MDFA, or whether it's Mumbai City FC, just go to Azad Maidan, go to the Andheri Sports Complex, buy a ticket. It's not expensive. It's 200, 300 rupees, and watch a match and see the passion of the fans. See how, the fans come out, they sing for 90 minutes, they cheer for their team. It's almost infectious in that sense. And, you don't need, and I'll compare it to the IPL, where you go and after every 4 is hit or every, wicket is taken, there's the loudspeakers booming with music and everyone's enjoying themselves. It's almost like a day out. At the football match, you'll feel the passion and the willingness to go out there and support a team. And once you go there and experience that, you'd want to keep going back. And that will then translate into supporting the national team as well when the opportunity comes. I know people who travel to Kolkata or to Kochi to watch matches. I spoke about the away culture of fans traveling from cities, going to other cities just to follow their team. And it starts at the local level, and my advice to everybody here would be go encourage your local team, whether it's a school team, academy team, just go out there and experience it, and you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Absolutely.
Two things. One is, hello. Yeah. So two things. One, I would say that maybe as a audience and as Indians, we should stop comparing football to cricket. Okay. Cricket has grown and it's right up there. We have to do our own growing. Okay. It's just like you have two sons. They do their own growing. So the 11-year-old will do the same something, and 13-year-old will do something. But a typical thing is we have to support both of them, and we have to see to it that both the games are equally beautiful. We are with football, and we have to see to it that what we can do our bit to see it grow, and that's what it will be needed. And as Gaurav was mentioning, it basically needs all our support. Instead of we mentioning that typically this thing is, we should support our local teams, and that's our way of working for development of football. And I'm sure that as we speak, it's just warming up. Just to share with you a little bit about women's football, recently the Indian national team, before they played the World Cup under 17, they were camping in Jamshedpur for a year, and we managed to help them with the infrastructure. We also hosted the under 17 SAF Cup, the South Asian Football Federation Cup, and just to share with you, we had little over 8,000 audience supporting the women's age group team, which was the highest recorded attendance for women's football for age group. And SAF actually wrote us a letter of appreciation saying that we could never imagine that we would have such an audience for women's football. So I think we as a country are evolving. We as a country are just about warming up. We have to believe in ourselves and do our bit to whatever needs to be done for the sport. Thank you.
Absolutely. Paul, anything? Oh, I was just coming.
I'm used to answering questions, not making statements.
I was just coming also to, idols, football idols. Like we have, the reality is cricket has created also, and again, I completely agree. In fact, I've always seen cricketers support football. I think they often have football matches where the cricketers play. I think if I'm not mistaken, even before matches, they sometimes kick around a football. So I think that's their way. And when I had Virat on my show, he spoke about loving football too. And again, most sporty kids play everything, right? Then there comes a time when they pick, or their passion becomes more for something. So I think basically promoting or encouraging all sport is something that we should be doing. And yeah, so I was saying having sexy idols is important, right? So when you have football players who become really big and people look up to them, especially the youngsters, that's big, and that's also partly media created. So I think everyone can do their bit to encourage, that as well. So on that note, thank you so much. Fabulous conversation. Also, one thing in the book that we didn't mention is I had no idea that there are places in India which are completely committed to people like Messi or Ronaldo, where they have their houses painted and colored and they celebrate them, and festivals for players and, who they've never met or never even been to those countries perhaps. So that kind of thing was really quite eye-opening. So thank you very much. And are there any questions from the audience? Anything?
Oh, there's a microphone there.
Congratulations. I think it's very encouraging to hear you. But I think what's happening, we need democratization of the game rather than the commercialization. Because right now, there are so many schools around here. We are very lucky to have schools with very big playgrounds. And they're all commercialized. So only the rich can get it. So we are reducing the pool rather than, it's entirely, if money was the model and commercialization was the model, why are we doing so badly in cricket? It's a disgrace. BCCI is flush with funds, and why on earth? Today there is an edit article in Times of India on the main page. It's a disaster, defeat for India with all the money spent. I'm very sorry. I think what we need is democratization. I mean, so I will be glad. I'm sorry, but this is what is happening. So,
I'll start, and I'm sure you guys have viewpoints on this as well. I think as far as football is concerned, there is a fair amount of democratization. I think, as Tara was mentioning, there are a lot of school tournaments. They might not be very organized. And because of the fact that they're not very organized, there isn't a very organized competitive structure at the youth level at this point in time, which is why I think the awareness is not there, which is why maybe you sitting in your living room might not be aware of it. It might not be getting covered in the local newspaper. There might not be a clipping, or there might not be an article put online for you to read and understand what's happening at the school level. In fact, there is a football tournament called the Subroto Cup, which is organized by the Air Force, where over 10,000 schools all across the country take part. And this tournament has actually been running for, I think, 20, 30,
No,
40
60,
years, 60 years.
60 years.
So as far as the participation is concerned, not only is it very important, but it's actually happening. It's just that the awareness of it, and I think Tara mentioned that we need to get football more in the popular culture. And what I mean by that is not just having Bollywood films made on it, but actually getting the mainstream media to cover it. You tend to see the big spreads in the Times of India and the Hindustan Times and other newspapers when the FIFA World Cup comes around, right? You'll have these pullouts, cutouts, supplements, which will show you the groups, the teams. In fact, and I'll take a little bit of time here, when the publisher for this book actually came to us, the publisher's initial thought was, can you create a guide to the FIFA World Cup of 2022? And there was no mention of Indian football there. And when both Neel and I got together, and we said, this is not a book that we want to write, this is not a book that we want to read. There's nothing about India and Indian football and what's happening in the Indian football landscape at this point in time. And we then put our heads together and came up with a structure for the book. And went back to the publisher and said, we feel this is what needs to be done. So the publisher wanted one full book, 10, 15, 20 chapters on the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. We've actually dedicated just one chapter to it. And there are 10 other chapters which are dedicated to just Indian football and what's happening here. I think that awareness is something that really, really needs to be created, which will then show you that there is actual democratization happening as far as football is concerned. I won't get into cricket, that's not my area of expertise. I don't want to start any controversies here, but as far as football is concerned, it's definitely happening.
And actually, I think, as you said, it's about awareness. Like, I had no clue that there were so many matches. Like, on a weekly basis, I think we're at least 2, whether it's MDFA or DPLD or something else, or MSSA. There's actually a lot. So it's also about the awareness. Also, and I don't mean to be a South Bombay slight snob, but I have to say it is the one time when our kids are like, why aren't we in school in Andheri or Juhu, because the facilities are so much better. I mean, you play Don Bosco, the school has a football culture because they have so many grounds. We come from that side of town where literally we have like a tiny ground. They play football in our garden, which is, the building garden this big. So actually, I hope, again, as an eternal optimist, that when you have harder infrastructure issues, I think maybe, hopefully, you come out stronger. And I saw this after lockdown. 21 months, our Indian kids were homeschooled. Nowhere else in the world, apart from Uganda, had that long school closures. We were in Singapore. I was with friends who play for Turf Club. Their kids had only 2 months away from the football field. We had 21 months with no organized sport, and these kids came to the semis. They came like 3rd, 4th out of 16 or 18 teams, which is pretty cool considering. So I like to think that because we have sometimes a tougher situation, I think sometimes we're hungrier, maybe, I hope, to win. So, yeah, in 10 years we'll talk and see where everyone's got to. But yes, yeah, please.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I'm so sorry, but you can definitely...
Maybe just those 2. Let's just take those 2 questions because they've been waiting. Very quick.
We have another session.
Yeah,
okay.
we'll
Or maybe you ask the
Yeah.
questions and then they can answer you. If you just ask the questions and then they'll answer you after. Let them answer.
Okay.
Sorry. Just last two. Yes?
Give them the mic.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. So I was just generally saying when I was playing football, it's just that when you spoke about infrastructure being a problem, sometimes I think that I don't know if it makes us stronger from a very pragmatic sense, because when you play and you're fighting every day for like that corner of the ground. In my school, we had a football ground when I joined, and each year they kind of cut it off to put one extra bus over there. Right? This is despite us going to South Zonal clusters, coming to the semis, finishing it off, and your football dream kind of dies over there. Right? Because when you get a smaller ground to play at, and when you actually finally play a match, your stamina, it cannot last in any way. And then there are schools who have dedicated grounds to the very privileged ones, who obviously walk you out of the park, and that's where talent dies. So on a grassroots level, what has been your experience with schools just taking it seriously? I mean, I have basketball, which is a very high scoring sport. So, you know, it's very nice to easy and go and cheering there. Exactly like cricket. But for football, it's such a beautiful game which needs to be enjoyed in the time that it is. I don't know where that disconnect, how are we going to kind of bridge that? So that's my question. We can chat about this later.
I think we'll chat about it.
Sure, yeah, we will chat about it afterwards.
Again, my question is somewhat further to what this man just asked. It's about, I think Mukul mentioned, it's where from the age of 8 to 16 where a person who is probably a great footballer or could be a potential great footballer for our nation is lost in the way because of a lot of parental pressure and the society. So if I could ask you, the panel here, I mean, what could be the biggest challenge if removed, realistically possible? Probably help us as a nation reach the World Cup, because as we said, we are still 20-25 years away from the World Cup, and I think if we start looking at that age group where we lose potential great players for the country is something of probably just one challenge realistically that removed from the system.
Okay, great. So we'll take both of these questions
Yeah.
and potentially a third one as well.
Okay, yeah, hi. I actually would love if you can just give your recommendation on investment into football, because I think like we are a country with a lot of talent, a lot of people. I don't think we have a problem of not having talented footballers. What do you think is the investment needed from the private sector? Like we see a lot of club football, but also from the government. Like where do they need to put the money to make India a successful football country?
Good question.
Sure. Fantastic.
Thank you
great.
for all your questions.
Thank
I
you,
wish-
everyone. Whenever there's lots more questions waiting, it means it's gone well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you.